Welcome to No Question About That. This is the post Manchester United 1, Wolves 1 pod. That's a little painful saying it. I'm Ed with Adam. Adam, how's it going?
I'm lucky with the time difference for you and I. We don't have to try and go to sleep after that one. I was really wound up afterwards. I think all those frustrations that go away for a little while after the good results, they just come flooding back after the bad results. And I think it does make for a really interesting discussion with where things sit, like where they are on the table and this result in the grand scheme. It's funny, everyone's just picking and choosing which side of the narrative they currently sit. So, yeah, but I've certainly calmed down a bit. Thank God we couldn't go straight after the game.
Yeah, might have been a little emotional. It was dreadful. So we might as well get that out of the way. There were almost no redeeming features about this game. It's very hard to defend what's going on other than to say United had 8 players out through suspensions and injuries and AFCON and all of that. And of course, that has an impact on what is already a fairly thin squad and what Amorim could do, especially off the bench and the balance in midfield and all of that kind of stuff. And yet, I try not to go off the handle on all of this kind of stuff because it's not a fully formed squad. And as much as I think Amorim should have been getting more out of this lot after 62 games than he is, there's just no point getting hyperbolic about it. And yet, I don't half feel a little bit, the stakes are much lower, but a little bit how I felt after the Europa League final, just how flat it was and how mental the formation was, given some of the good performances recently. And then certainly had vibes of Grimsby, for sure, didn't it? I think you were on those 2 pods, Adam. We seeing a pattern here.
Yeah, I'm bad luck on the post games.
And Everton, West Ham as well.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately all the bad results. Grimsby, Brentford, Everton, West Ham, Bournemouth. Those games this season, they all have those same hallmarks where the same issues, the lack of defensive solidarity. I think the patterns in attack with Reuben Amorim hasn't figured out low blocks after 60 games, and I'm more curious before I go any further. Where do you stand on how much of the absences have an impact?
Well, they definitely have an impact because, we got our best creator out in Bruno, and clearly if you move Ugarte into midfield other than Bruno, it's going to have an impact on your ability to progress the ball and create chances. And our most direct and top scorer in Brian Mbeumo, he's always a threat, even if no one's playing well or even when he's not playing well. So that's definitely had an impact. I mean, honestly, I think more of an impact. If you look at the recent times we played pretty well, first half against Bournemouth, first half against Newcastle, and parts of the Villa game, in each of those, he basically switched up the system, right? I just couldn't believe it. I was looking at the formation, the team when it came out, and United insists still on doing it in number order on the socials. Just why? You think you're going to give something away? I mean, they train in, they warm up in a back 3 and a back 4 just to confuse everybody. I suppose.
Yeah, everyone was speculating pre-game was another ruse.
Well, that's it. I was looking at it. I was going, well, it could be a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2 or a 3-4-3, and it was the latter. And I just don't know how many times we have to see that, especially, particularly when you've got 2 fullbacks on their stronger-footed sides.
We've talked about it so many times.
Who are supposed to give the width to that attack, and they're the principal points of the attack, just how flat it can feel. And United scored with the first shot on target. And that's, in whatever minute that was when. And it was just dead flat and really predictably flat as well. And that was the weirdly frustrating thing because, in recent, there's so much talk about the system and the formation. And I know there are different things and his principles and all of that kind of stuff. And then he just went back to what he knows. Yeah.
It is concerning, isn't it? When his back's against the wall, even when they're chasing a game, he can't bring it upon himself to fully trust the players on the bench. So you've got, I know that Shea Lacey, Chidoebe aren't the finished product, but it is in the club's, ethos, heritage to put faith in those players and take risks. And it's not about the individuals so much for me as aren't you chasing the game? Why are you replacing? Aiden haven't clearly not clearly. We didn't see anything like a niggle or any reason to bring him off. He didn't say anything like that in his press conference. The decision to sub on Lenny Yoro in that situation drew more ire. Obviously, Bentito Mantado made his debut, which was really nice and didn't have much of an impact. But it's really weird how, because of how he speaks about the youth players, and you spoke about this, about bringing them up unnecessarily, it's now making people react negatively to the youth players. So when they fail or struggle, not everyone, people clamp down and jump down on them. And it's a really weird situation. I don't like it.
Yeah, no, it's become a culture war. And I don't like that at all. And it's become one of those wedge issues that divides people online. And I take that with a pinch of salt. Although clearly people in the stadium frustrated, jeers at half time. I don't think people were happy with another centre-back for centre-back sub with 15 minutes to go and you're trying to chase a win.
Obvious cheering again, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Attack. It's become a symbol of discontentment when fans bring out that one, because that is to say, and that's, many post-Fergie, I mean, even during Fergie's time, honestly, in some of his more prosaic teams, not very often, but it's become a symbol of the post-Fergie, the crap performances, wanting something more, right? And, the reason why the youth players are a culture issue, a culture war, is because those who are in tune with the club as something more than just pure entertainment see that as part of the cultural heritage of the club and part of their proud tradition of being a Mancunian, right? I'm not Mancunian. I've spent a lot of time in Manchester, selling parts of the family from that part of the world. I feel in touch enough, right, to kind of speak on those issues. And for some people, it just doesn't mean anything at all, right? It's just, I just want to win. It's my team. I just want them to win. Who gives a fuck if they're 15 or 35? And that I kind of feel fans are sort of divided on those lines there, to the point where, and I'm not calling him out or picking on him, but James Muppeteers put that data piece out on Twitter about the number of minutes given to under 23 players. And I just thought it just missed the mark, right? Not having to go at him, don't know him, anything like that. I just, that's not the point. It's not about players under a certain age. It's about
that's the squad age.
Culture.
It's
that's just how you build a squad, right? And they're deliberately trying to build a squad that's younger for financial reasons as well as cultural reasons, and clear out a lot of the players who've failed. But it's something more than that. When they've grown up, even if they're from abroad and transplanted into Manchester when they're a kid, you expect them to kind of take on the reins of being from Carrington and being a young kid coming through. There's a lot of support for Alejandro Garnacho before there wasn't, and perhaps, the way he behaved was not Carrington-like as well. And that was part of the ire towards him. So I think it's that, really, and you just get a lot more rope as a manager if you are willing to play the players. He's playing some younger players now. Brought Jack Fletcher on at half time. Didn't have that much of an impact, but Amorim praised him quite a lot after the game, actually. Obviously, Mantato, Shea Lacey came on the other day against Villa. So he's integrating some now in desperate times. But it wasn't his first port of call at all. And you can definitely make the argument, as people do, that none of these players are ready. You can make that argument, but it's kind of not the point, right?
It's not the point. Yeah. That's the whole thing. It's entirely missed, I think, is that players like Federico Maqueda, and I know it's easy to point out sometimes the exceptions to the rule, those moments that are really hard to replicate, but the whole point is you throw on players who add an element of unpredictability, and there is a low floor, but there's a ceiling to that. There's a high ceiling to that too, because you don't know what can happen. I just feel like when you start the game with 7 defensively minded players, so 5 defenders being 3 left-footed centre-backs, 2 fullbacks playing wing-back roles, and 2 defensive midfielders. And it was funny watching Manuel Ugarte perform the Bruno Fernandes role and see that he's clearly been given those instructions. When people criticise Bruno for roaming, that's what he's being told to do. And he's also explained that on Rio Ferdinand's podcast. But people seem to ignore all that. But it's the whole thing about taking risk, and Reuben Amorim's lack of appetite for risk, and it's that whole courage thing. And like you said about the youth, one of the things about that percentage in that data, And I appreciate James's want to be positive and find a cause for optimism, because generally I'm like that too. I just think when a manager is inclined to be negative, I'm not inclined to be positive in return. So with all the debuts and everything last season, that's when we were throwing league games away. The league wasn't a priority. We were rotating in reverse for the Europa League. So when Tyler Fredrickson was playing and Cheeto was playing a lot, who also wasn't playing in the Europa League, that is a little out of context with what's happening this season. You need to separate one from the other, which we often want to do with the two seasons. So I just feel like we miss, and social media is the best place to do this, is to miss all the context in a discussion. And you and I were talking about this after the extra the other day, is social media, you almost have to put terms and conditions with everything you say, because if you state something like what you said about the percentage of academy players, you have to like put a disclaimer that I don't mean this. I literally only mean what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. No, that's right. Most of my replies to that particular tweet, and it's all throwaway stuff, isn't it? But were of the nature of, well, you play them now, they've proven themselves to not be ready. I was like, it's just a data point, mate. I'm like reframing it a little bit in the way I think it is actually is important, right? And why it actually offends people. If you talk to Wayne Barson, who's on the pod, has written all the history books and is steeped in the culture of the club, he's offended when Reuben Amorim shits on young players for no particular reason. I mean, it was just like it still calls me. I had to go at Obi, Collier, and Amas for no reason whatsoever, other than to divert the conversation away from a difficult discussion about Kobe Mainu, which he didn't want to answer, right? Or felt he'd answered and didn't have to, climb down from his ivory tower to answer it anymore for plebs in the press room who are asking the question, and that does irk. And it would irk less, obviously, if the team was playing good football, was playing attacking football regularly. And I don't mean creating a lot of XG, because it's not the same thing. And then
volumes of shots at low quality.
Yeah, it's just not. It's just not the same, Like someone said in the comments on YouTube, and I was like, yeah, absolutely right. He said, the old heads compare this team to Dave Sexton's team, and it's not a compliment. And, the most negative manager, like with Jose, I guess, at least Jose found a way to win things.
Well, pragmatist,
Yeah, pragmatist. And he kind of feels like he's from that school. And I don't think many of us thought he was from that school when he joined.
Well, when I was looking into, because let's be honest, nobody watched sporting regularly except for the Champions League. So everyone knew about the City result and things like that. But one of the things I was reading from reporters in Portugal, and there was a guy on Duncan Castle's podcast, a Portuguese guy, forgive me, I can't remember his name, but he was saying that people just assume when new coaches come along, they come from that new school Guardiola sort of thinking. But he was saying that Amorim described himself as much more out of the Jose Mourinho school, and obviously they have a relationship. But he is much more like that. And you can see that in his, like what I was saying about his backs to the wall sort of reaction to thing. He is more of a pragmatist. He is reactive. He's not proactive. So he's like, the problem for me, like United don't impose their will on teams. So today, what he was talking about after the game, the reason he played 3 at the back, 5 at the back, whatever you want to call it, is because Wolves play 5 at the back. So he was trying to counter their width. And my whole thing is with that, and I'm sure you have the same reaction, is that why are you worrying so much about countering Wolves instead of making Wolves counter you? You're the superior side, with or without the 8 personnel who weren't playing. So for me, I think like people can point to Liverpool and Arsenal having closer than ideal victories, but they still won the game. They found the way to win. And I know that Patrick Dorgu was centimetres offside, but ultimately he didn't win the game. He didn't create enough to win the game. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't want to talk about XG too much, but they only created 2 big chances in 90 minutes against a team that's not won a game and only drawn 2 games this season and hadn't drawn since the start of October, and with 12 losses in a row, 29 goals conceded. So
yeah, and
there's only so many excuses you can make.
Yeah, absolutely. And only scored 3 goals away from home all season, right? Like, how much threat did you expect them to have? And of course, any Premier League side is going to have some threat. I mean, they scored
a tiny period. You expect them to maybe have a tiny period where they control the game, right? Like where they turned it over for the 10 minutes before half time, and that was really all they needed.
But that's the frustration, isn't it? It's the passivity. It's like you're screaming out for, even with the players out, United have better players, right? You're screaming out for them to just put Wolves under a bit of pressure because they're going to crumble because they concede so many goals. Even the goal we scored, right? It was just a little bit of pressure. Got into a good, it was just Aiden Heaven picking up the ball. And
then he was not even challenged on the ball until he got to the box.
Right.
The luck came their way from attacking. That's how I saw that goal.
Absolutely. And that's the frustration. Setting up in what feels like a negative way with so many defenders and defensive-minded players, unable to progress the ball into decent areas and therefore get off high-quality shots. Evidenced by the two big chances, which I think is it over 0.3 XG or 0.35 XG? I forget exactly how Opta frame it, something like that. And I think it was 11 or 12 shots overall or whatever it was. But
I think it was 16-12 in the end, but they still had
16-12. Yeah.
It didn't, and
it just
game
felt
state.
Passive. It felt like this is not a real Manchester United side. And I think the thing is I can't get inside his head. I don't really understand. I couldn't understand the thinking when you've seen United perform so well in the first half against Newcastle. And they were genuinely good against Newcastle in that first half. And then lose it in the second half. And I know it's incredibly reductive to say, well, he played 4 at the back in the first half and he switched to a back 3 in the second half, and that's when it all went to shit, although he just tends to do that when he wants safety. And that's the deeply, unbelievably frustrating thing. And afterwards, he just said, well, we'll be a much better team when we get back. I have no worries. But the difference between 4th, getting in the Champions League, and 8th, it's not much. It looks like it's going to be.
He also said he didn't want to make excuses and then proceeded to outline the reasons why they didn't win, which sounded a lot like excuses. I don't know about you. I was sort of thinking, is there, obviously he's a coach who's learning on the job because he's still young, and that's not in a condescending way. It's because of his age and because of his experience. But I wonder how much is there is like, it's the Claudio Ranieri Tinkerman sort of thing where it's like tinkering for tinkering's sake, but also the way he speaks in press conferences, it does feel a little bit like curse of ego to me, like where I can prove that my system can prevail regardless of whether there's 3 at the back or 4 at the back, because he's constantly spoken about. I know that because of the language barrier, he mistakes system for formation or we misinterpret it because of that language barrier. But it does feel, I don't know about you, is that overreactive to say there's a little bit of ego in there?
Oh, I think there is, yeah. And when he said the other day, I didn't want to change because the players would think it was you, the press, that made me do it. That's ego, but that's sort of like fragile ego, isn't it? And they're narcissism and having a very fragile ego or not being very self-secure are two sides of the same coin, right? And sometimes they come out. And I've said before, I don't think he manages his emotions very well as a human. And he's said it as well. He's a man who wears his heart on the sleeve, and sometimes I don't think that serves him well. But he also has this tendency before games, I wonder, to overthink things a little bit, And this was, I know Rob Edwards said afterwards, basically the point I'm going to say. They probably thought they'd come here and they'd just like put 4 past us and it'd be easy. Well, yeah, because they're crap. And they're 2 points all season and no wins away from home and 3 goals away from home. And we beat them 4-1 and the other day and really only took a little bit of pressure to do that. I didn't even play that well for the 4-1, honestly. Our listeners in the comments didn't like. But, hey. And it's just, you're kind of, it's he overthought it. He didn't need to switch to a defensive formation despite all the injuries. It's a shame because when the changes did come, well, there's one at half time and the second one was a centre-back for centre-back substitution with 15 to go. Didn't change anything.
Yeah, I don't understand if you're going to bring a player off the bench for 45 minutes, are they just not as close to being fit to start even if they don't play 90 minutes? What's the difference? Like if you're so hit up for personnel, you are sometimes forced into that. Like the benefit of Aiden Heaven and what happened against Newcastle is crisis does breed opportunity. So sometimes you do have to take a chance. Now, you can pay the price for that. But I think people would be more hesitant to jump on his back if they knew he was trying in that aspect and like taking risks. Because like the whole thing, we come back to ethos and heritage, it is a club that has an appetite for risk. And because we're not getting that, it does, like, to me, it strikes as cowardice.
Yeah, it gave those vibes. Yeah, I mean, it's a strong word, isn't it, cowardice? But it definitely gave those vibes, and no one at United will stand for that for very long. It just doesn't feel like the United way.
That's why they're booing to me. That's I think the only reason why United fans at home will ever get on your back is because you're not attacking.
Yeah,
and it was very clear they just wanted more.
And of course, you can point to all the underlying numbers. United have the highest XG in the country, in the league, and should have many more goals than they actually have. And you could kind of argue, well, they just need to be a bit more clinical. Well, £200 million worth of forwards should help you be a bit more clinical, of course. But it's something more than that, I think. I think it's not just that. And like, as I said, even high XG feels passive, and a little bit of context to there. We quite a lot of that XG was racked up against Everton and Chelsea. There were the two games against Bournemouth and Wolves that really juiced some of that as well. So I don't know whether I would look at the underlying data without some context and go, yeah, we're absolutely nailed on for the top four. But it should feel existential for Reuben, It should.
Sorry,
it should, because
like what you were saying about underlying metrics. Sorry, I got to say, like, they're also 18th in second halves.
Yeah.
It's not all rosy, and they're defensively they're a mess. And it seems like the more they try to defend, the worse they are at it. They need to. They're a bad back foot team. They're a front foot team. They're just better at it when they're on the front foot. When they try to defend the lead, they can't hold it together. After the goal, when they're on the front foot for 10 minutes, they looked better. It looked fluid for a little bit. Patrick Dorgu flashed past the post. Benjamin Sesko flashed past the post. And then Wolves got ascendancy for 10 minutes and broke through. And it didn't. It felt like it was coming, but it didn't feel like it was coming for very long.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was against Newcastle, where they just kept finding a way to bail out. And if not for Sonny Lamans today, they would have lost.
Very good save with his feet again, Lamans. Yeah. He's doing a good job. He's a good one, I think. Yeah.
By far the best player today.
I didn't mind the back three construction. If you're going to play back three, Heaven, Martinez, and Shaw are all good ball progressors. I mean, obviously, Heaven and Martinez better than Shaw, I'd say, on that front. It's just where they were progressing the ball to. Dorgu, who I think whose performance on the right wing, when he had Amorim explained it, he had the freedom to attack, didn't have to worry about behind
Player
him.
of the week.
Yeah,
Player of the week goes back to playing left wing back.
And it's not like. I think I'm not quite sure what it is with Dorgu, because like you saw in that performance when he's on the right wing, he can be a good attacker. He put in a great cross tonight, actually, for Sesko, for one of the headers that he should have scored with. That was unusual, because normally we don't see that from him, right? There's ingredients there. I definitely cannot say I'm sure that he's going to be good. In fact, if I was betting, I would bet against him ever being good at United. He's had a year here. There are some ingredients. He hasn't progressed nearly as much as I'd hoped he would have done, in that time. But he's just had his performance of a lifetime, or at least in a United shirt. And then he's stuck in a position where for 40 odd games that he's had in the United shirt, he's been pretty average and mediocre. And we just went back to the old system that we know has failed over and over again, especially when you have Dalot and Dorgu in those, they're not going to contribute anything, really.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. Like I loved seeing him put in a cross from deep and just let Sesko go to work. Like Sesko's best moments were when he was allowed to go to work in the box. So hit the post from the corner. Didn't get enough power on that header from Dorgu. And when he got the ball turned, got some space and shot past the post. That's just those are the positions they've got to try and get him into when he can sort of just make something happen. It was nice to see, and I'm sure we'll get on to Sesko, but with Dalot and Dorgu, when they cross, anything can happen. That's the thing. That's why you can't trust them. And Dorgu at the moment, unfortunately, despite having quite a lot of time at left wing back, is probably at this stage either a left back or a right winger. And he's clearly a confidence player, because he was absolutely flowing against Newcastle after he scored the goal, because he was full of confidence. And I just think maybe putting him back in that position straight afterwards probably wasn't the way to empower a player who just won Player of the Week.
All right, you mentioned him, Benjamin Sesko. I think there's a lot to this player. I mean, he's definitely a better player than Rasmus Højlund. He's got more about his game. The ceiling is higher. The tool set's better. His finishing was always the point at RB Leipzig where you're like, he's not really efficient. He's okay, but he's not super efficient. Actually, I think I'm right in saying that Rasmus Højlund converts a higher percentage rate. He just never shoots, right? So he never scores. And that's definitely an area to work on for Sesko, because in a few games in a row now, when he's played, he's missed some good chances. He missed 2 when he came back. The first game he came back from injury. He's missed 2 good ones tonight. One he made himself. Obviously, another he hit the post, and then the header. So it's 3 good chances there. One he created all himself, but there's something to him, but he needs some goals.
Yeah, it's just as simple as that. So I'm very much pro Sesko. So I think that like with a young player like that, you can see it. And when someone has the tools, he's got like fixable things, whereas Højlund couldn't find himself on the end of chances. Sesko keeps finding himself in good positions. Even that offside goal, which was a beautiful ball from Casemiro, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. If he just put that in, that probably would have helped him a lot, just seeing the ball go in the net. He just needs to see one go in. For me, like obviously after a month out, he's played limited minutes, not played full 90. He's played the full 90 today. He's obviously looking better, but he does need to see one go in. In this little run against teams with fragile defenses, he just needs to see one go in. It would be really good for him to score against Leeds, but we're just going to keep saying that until he scores. But I like what I'm saying. There's a lot more to work with. But again, people had and I wasn't like this, so I can't claim to have been like people flagged concerns when he was signed because you're thrusting a young player into the number 1 role. And that comes with a lot of risk, and that puts a lot of pressure on a young player's shoulders.
Yes, and there's no fallback, really, because Josh Xerxes is presumably off to Roma. I don't think he did himself. I know he scored tonight with a bit of fortune, but I don't know what role he plays in this team. I mean, even if we went to a 4-2-3-1, he's going to play the 10? No.
5th choice?
Yeah, so it's better for him and better for the club if he moves on, but it leaves us desperately exposed. Another Sesko injury, and we're playing Mason Mount at false 9, and he's injured.
Is that squad planning to you? Do you think I saw someone say...
No, I think it's bad squad planning, yeah. And, even if you believe that Chido was on an accelerated path, I think we saw last season was not quite ready. He's 17 years old. He's super young. Needs game time. They're trying to develop him. They've been managing his minutes this year as well. Just make sure as his body grows that he doesn't get injuries. All sensible. The after Amorim talked about Chido in that press conference, there was obviously a briefing to the press because there were a couple of positive pieces came out about him. They believe in him, top player, one for the future, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, just needed another body there. And of course, with no European football, there were never going to be many games this season. So it's a difficult squad planning exercise to get enough players in there. But we see now with just a few injuries, just how paper thin it is. And we're going back to trying to find difficult solutions that we know don't work.
And we're going up against a striker, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who was linked to the club. Nobody wanted, and I certainly didn't want. But it's really hard. I think he's got 8 goals this season. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to fill the backup striker role these days, where we have it. Like we've moved away from 2 strikers up front. So one, it's really hard to develop a young striker playing up front on your own, where even if you're surrounded by 2 wide forwards, it's really hard as a young striker. It's really hard to develop that way. It's very much deep end, or you have to make an impact in limited minutes. And Cheetah Obi, it's the same scenario where you can still be on an accelerated pathway, but he's also still 17 years old. So it's a really tough situation. It's also hard to find probably a forward who can play fluidly through a front 3 or a couple of positions, who can also manage to play up front in the Premier League, because playing up front in the Premier League is a whole different animal to Italy or Spain.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very true. Yeah. I mean, it's just, the squad is fragile. That was one where we just didn't have enough. And we were overstocked with defenders, basically. Got a lot of central defenders. Not enough bodies in midfield, or at least of the profile that Reuben Amorim wants. And not enough central strikers. A lot of sort of wide 10s.
Where do you stand on, so for example, I saw someone saying that Lissandro Martinez was trialled in midfield, did a job. Could they have pushed him further forward? Patrick Dorgu did a good job out wide. They should have pushed him further forward. Do you think there's anything to that? Is there something in Reuben Amorim not persisting with things that aren't necessarily his own ideas? And it is shoehorning, but it's retrofitting a solution in the short term.
Yeah. I mean, on the latter first, I don't know whether Patrick Dorgu would be a really effective right-sided, forward, cutting inside. He's certainly got the pace. He strikes a good ball, although it's not often on target, as we saw today. Or maybe took a little deflection, didn't it? And I just don't know whether he's got the skill sets or not. He did do it for Lecce a few times. On Lissandro Martinez, I'm not an advocate of that one. I think he'd find that quite hard on the turn and coverage, lateral coverage. I mean, Amorim talked about it before anyway. It's not his natural position.
No ground coverage with him and Casemiro.
Yeah, I don't really see it. It's just completely different. Just because you can make a few tackles, that's not really the point of
Isn't that just what a destroyer does? Isn't that what?
Yeah. Well, we've got Ugarte who goes around and kicks people, so it doesn't mean it's good in there. So, I mean, the one thing he got the other day when he played 45 minutes there was loads and loads of space. Villa just sat off him and let him pass. And obviously he looks good when he's not under pressure. I think that would probably be quite different if he was, intense, being turned and having to play the wrong way, which he doesn't have to do at centre-back quite so often, and to cover all that ground. So I don't think that's a solution. Desperate times, maybe.
Oh, I mean, even in the second half today, do you try something different? Get someone who can spray the balls out of midfield a little bit more than Ugarte, things like that. Guess
so, yeah.
And because Dorgu can run at players, and they just didn't have that today. So it was either give it to Cunha and just see what happens, and otherwise it was a lot of that's when the attack thing started, because they were just going side to side from when they were forward at the back. It was going right back all the way to left back. It was really frustrating.
It is, and that's okay if you're trying to pull the opposition out of shape. But when you do it slowly, and I think one of the other things was very, very noticeable, especially in the second half, a little bit different when Jack Fletcher came on after half time, although, he wasn't super involved in the game. There were just massive spaces between all the players. And so those high-risk balls, the risk-reward balance that you get from Bruno, who can both execute the long, the up, back and through strategy, and execute it really well. I just wasn't there. I mean, what you expecting Manuel Ugarte to hit 40-yard balls? I mean, come on. And so it was just they weren't tight enough together. But that's part of Amorim's system, isn't it? It's, make the pitch bigger. What do you call it? Stretching the pitch.
The frustrating thing for me that I always notice against, low blocks is that I can't see how they're going to pick through them unless someone just makes a run at the right time when Bruno has the ball, or Casemiro, who's quite adept at that. I just don't see how anything's going to happen. I can't see passages of play or passing triangles or anything like that will open anything up. That's what's really frustrating to me. No, it's a constant problem. I think the hallmark of a good attack is sustaining pressure, and United can't do it. They either win the ball in really dangerous areas because of players like Mason Mount or Ahmad, who they don't have. Hopefully they'll have Mbeumo or Ahmad back because of one of them being eliminated this week. But then they've got to come back from Africa. And it's to me, that just screams more to the fact that you're relying on the quality of personnel over a triumph of system, which is what today should have been about, is that your system gets you through when you don't have the players.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the system does not create enough chances. The players do. And I think that's still true. So the game model from last season is still in place. The adaptations were some change in the out of possession structure, which has been a real problem at United. Still is a problem, honestly. Not much change in possession other than to get it forward quickly in certain circumstances, right? I think they were very, very direct at the beginning of the season. They've become a little less so sometimes, but they're not at the 40% of balls going long sort of status as they were. But no, there's no systemic way of us just producing chance after chance. I mean, I know how a cheap shot this will sound like, but if you put Manchester City's second 11 they will play the same way as the first 11. Now, they might not be as good players, but they would play the same way, and United cannot do that. Now, there are an awful lot of this squad of players who probably won't be here in 2 years' time. We're going to see several. We'll see several leave in the summer, like Casemiro and Harry Maguire will almost certainly leave. Definitely, if we're not in Europe, no chance they stay. Xerxes may well be gone this winter. There'll be Manuel Ugarte will be sold in the summer. They'll have a question mark over Patrick Dorgu, whether they really believe in him or not, and probably a few others, right? So you've probably got 10 to 12 that'll leave over the next 2 years, and there'll be a complete sort of squad refresh over the period of the Ineos ownership, and you kind of understand that if you're going to finish 8th and 15th, that's kind of what should happen at a club like United's, right? But right at the moment, Reuben has not been able to get the 25 players that he's got in his squad to play the same way in the kind of patterns we expect. And his game model is basically last year's plus better players, as he sees it. And that will take you so far.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me. So one of the things I've wondered, obviously they're a little bit more heavily attacking focused, but how much is the attacking record as a result of the fact that you've actually got a £200 million attack now? Like how much is down to that rather than, and not to mention they've had really good fortune with absences until AFCON came along. And then they started to pick up injuries as the games got closer together and they had 3 games a fortnight instead of 1 game a week. It's really frustrating because I can see both sides of it, but at the same time, we should be seeing natural improvement in the players. I'm not really seeing player improvement. And what players have improved under Reuben Amorim in the last 12 months, you couldn't, even if you can name a few players, you couldn't name more than a handful. So like you said about switching the 11s, and one of the constant criticisms is how many managers have these players sacked? Well, if you saw that photo the other day of the players who had been turned into black and white who have now left,
it's not most many of them left. Yeah,
it's most of them. Like Delo was signed under Mourinho, Bruno was signed under Ole. There aren't that many. There just aren't that many anymore. Most of them were signed under Ten Hag and Amorim. So there's not that excuse anymore. Like we know that they're not up to the requisite quality, but this is like at some stage, the manager has to take responsibility for improving the players that he has, working with the players that he has, and getting natural improvement. So I'm really worried about the defensive record because to me, good teams, good defensively. It's just the hallmark of really good teams are built on a strong defense. And one thing I've always liked about United is even though they play attacking football, they're built on a sturdy defense. At the moment, they're historically bad defensively under Reuben Amorim.
Yeah, that's true. If I was being really glib, I'd say who's he improved? It's the players who've left. And that is unfair. It's unfair.
That's a very social media review.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm kidding. It's not actually. I mean, if you look at who's performing, Rashford's performing pretty well for Barcelona every time I've seen him. I think he looks good. He starts in a very wide position. He's not really scoring goals, but he's creating quite a lot. His quality in the final third's really high. Rasmus is scoring at 1 in 2, which is pretty good for him. We'll see what happens there. He's still
in the retirement league. Jamie Vardy and Nemanja Matic.
I know, Yeah. It's true.
Little bit of extra time and space.
It's a lower standard. There is more time and space and all of that. Yeah. Anthony's doing pretty well at Betis again this season. Not that I'm arguing for any of these players to be remaining at United. I'm just, putting context around my tongue-in-cheek comment. And then probably
Sancho had one good game the other day.
Yeah, Sancho's been fucking terrible. Although he did come on for Villa and was all right. Yeah,
the players who have stayed in England, not so good.
Yeah, Garnacho's having a bad season. And funnily enough, he was the one who performed best last season, at least in terms of the numbers, right? He was putting up really good numbers.
Do you know who the Aston Villa fans love? They love Victor Lindelof. He was really good the other night.
Yeah,
against Chelsea. He was but he was sturdy. Like United's best defence besides Varane and Martinez post Sir Alex is Lindelof and Maguire. People seem to forget that just because Lindelof, I actually liked Lindelof. I thought he was reliable. He was just a third centre-back. It's just, it was more a hallmark of bad squads and bad squad building. And, players thrust into roles they're not supposed to be in.
Although...
I don't think you loved that, did you?
In the pantheon of great United centre-back pairings, the 400 games that Maguire and Lindelof basically played together, it's not quite that many, but it's a lot. It's a lot. It seems a bit too much for their their quality as a pairing. He was always just physically, there was a problem with Lindelof, right? Yeah, I mean, he could be bullied off the ball.
It was also the every time a transfer window came around, he'd pick up a mysterious injury and wasn't able to be on the market. Speaking of the market, that's what I wanted to ask about. Has the last 2 games, I know it's very short-termism, but the fact it's the January window does matter. Has it changed your perception on what you think the club needs to do? Or do they need to look a little bit more shorter term just for the rest of the season? Is there anything to that for you? Or
no,
how are you thinking about it now?
No, I don't see the point in doing a loan. I think it's Conor Gallagher's people that are pushing that one because he wants out of Atletico and he's looking for a route back to the Premier League, last chance of getting visibility to make the World Cup squad or whatever, right? I don't see where he fits. He would be cover for Bruno, but he's not a great passer. He's just a good engine.
It's only if Ugarte goes, right?
He's not a cover at 6, Gallagher. He's not a number 6. If they sold Ugarte this winter, which I don't see is happening, but if they did do it, they would have to bring in another defensive player. You cannot spend the rest of the season hoping Casemiro doesn't get injured or suspended. I mean, I guess you could, but it wouldn't be a good idea. So you'd have to, but the thing is, right, it's really a question of right now, you have to assume that Amorim is still here for the long term, right? If you're planning for someone beyond him, then there's a completely different set of questions to think about. Right now, you have to plan for him to be here for the long term. And then therefore, anyone you buy has to fit in the kinds of profiles of players he wants. And it doesn't really change whether he plays a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-4-3, right? He still has certain profiles of player that he wants. Now, in the former, he gets an extra player in midfield, and that kind of helps with the control that we don't normally have. In the latter, he's got these specialists in the wing-back areas, the wide centre-backs, and the 2 inside 10s, right? Well, we've got the 2 inside 10s. He's got those now. We've got plenty of options there. The wide centre-backs, I think we're pretty well stocked, right? So if you believe that Lenny Yoro will come good again, he's just having a little bit of a dip, which is fine. 20-year-old centre-back and all that. Go look at your favourite centre-backs and see what they were doing at 20.
Well,
you've got Heaven, who's great on the ball and is having a real moment of it right now. And Lissandro, we'll see where he goes to. We're pretty well stocked in wide centre-backs. Central centre-back, well, depends whether you believe De Ligt's good enough, but it's good enough for this season, assuming he gets fit again, right? So you'd be like, well, we could do with another body in central midfield. We could probably do with a wing-back on either side, but probably left, right? If we were thinking about that, assuming Ahmad comes back at wing-back. And then we could do a support striker. But like most of those thinking, like, except unless you were going to buy a really high-quality left wing-back, because you just want to up the quality in wide areas because we're not producing enough from those areas, that's going to cost loads of money. The rest of them are kind of thinking about squad depth, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I do find it interesting that we haven't had links to wing-backs. There just aren't that many specialists who are worth the squeeze. So, and one thing you were saying about Lenny Yoro, like he's played the most minutes of any player his age defensively this season by, I think 2 years. So, like, that does matter. And it's like what you were saying about all that. But I don't think they'll bring anyone in for wingbacks because I just don't think they're too hard to find. I think that's in part what Reuben Amorim has realised, because I think he's realised off his own accord that he does have to change things because he's just not going to get those players. They can't go buy Nuno Mendes just because they want to. I'm not saying they want to. They just can't go do that. They're not in a position to. So he's having to work in what he has. And it seems like, I've said this a lot, I think that, like, apart from Ruben Neves, I think that's a possible arrival. It just depends on what his wage demands look like after playing in Saudi. That's the only sort of arrival in midfield I can see. And then I think Kobbie Mainoo stays now just because of his injury and the problems in midfield. I just think they're going to hold on to him. I just don't think there's been strong enough links. And then, the Xerxes situation, it seems like he goes, but it does frustrate me. And like, what's the plan there? Because you should have already bought a player so that you could sell him. That's how good buying and selling works, is that you sell from a position of strength instead of buying from a position of weakness. But it's very frustrating.
Yeah, and it's unclear. I mean, they were looking at the Semenyo deal. That would have cost 65 minimum because of the buyout clause. And then whatever else they'd have to pay up front to spread the payments and all of that. But they were still going to bring that forward from the summer. There's not a lot of cash in the bank that had been tapping the credit card, at least partly, probably. I mean, yeah, depending on how much you had to pay up front on that. So there's, I guess, money, but Amorim was fairly clear that they're not going to do it unless it's a player they really want. What's the balance of power here? Does Amorim have enough credit in the bank that he can demand the kind of players? Is there any wobble in the boardroom now where they're like, not sure if this guy's going to make it or not? Therefore, we bring in the players that we like, not the manager likes. There's obviously, it's been bending that way anyway in terms of United's transfer strategy under Ineos. I'd say with good reason, right? You know, like you just can't have what happened with Ten Hag happen again, where he just picks all his own players and we're left with hundreds of millions of pounds and years worth of unwinding to do. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. We're in a difficult position until they can work out. I mean, the PSR problem is not a problem. It won't be a problem in the squad cost rule either, but the cash problem is a problem. We owe an unbelievable amount of money to other clubs. You know, we owed a massive amount of money, then we spent £200 million. So we owe most of that money again, still. This will change a little bit when Casemiro and Maguire drop off the books this summer. They get rid of Xerxes. That's going to change the dynamic there. They'd probably get a decent fee for him, even if it's it's hard to plan if it's on a option rather than an obligation.
It has to be an obligation if you let him go. I think it's the only way you can do
it. With reasonable, even if it was like Roma have to qualify for the Champions League, they've got a chance, right? And you can probably bank on getting money for Rasmus Højlund. There was a press report that Napoli are under financial strain, but they are obligated if they meet certain conditions. That's what an obligation is. United were the only team in history to have a get out of an obligation with Sancho.
The Jadon Sancho clause, yeah.
Well,
I think it's a special circumstance with a player like that.
It's true. Rashford, I mean, it's hard to say with Barcelona. I think in terms of the fee and the quality of play and what they're getting out of him, you know, he's starting quite a lot of games. Some of it's rotation with Rafinha right at the moment, or Ferran, because obviously Lewandowski's getting old as well. I think they'd want him. How much money do they have? What's the situation with La Liga's wage constraints? You know, the 1-for-1 or 2-to-1 ratio that they have to sell to buy. That might cause an issue, but presumably you'd be able to get some kind of fee elsewhere given his performances this season. And the wages off the books, it's just a huge amount about to come off the books, which will give United some spending power. It's just, it will really be impacted if United are not in Europe. It's likely the amount we get for Højlund, Rashford, Xerxes, Ugarte, or whoever, and the wage release from Casemiro, Maguire, Rashford, and so on, that's probably what we get to spend because of the cash problem and the mounting debt. And if we're in Europa League, you can add another player to that. And if we're in the Champions League, you can add 2 players to that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that they'll be able to bring in 2 midfielders. Beyond that, it sort of just depends how the loans shake out. I mean, I was just looking then because I needed to check, but Napoli aren't like a lock to make the Champions League. They're 3rd, but they're only a point ahead of 4th and 2 points ahead of 5th. That can change really quickly. Napoli aren't the team that they have been under Antonio Conte. And, you know, Marcus Rashford has been really good, but Barcelona's financial problems just mean nothing's a guarantee there. The fact that they do need to buy a striker because of Lewandowski, and they're having to look at budget options there as is. The players they've been linked to aren't exactly Barcelona standard, the players that the fans might expect there. So there's just no guarantee. And then Marcus Rashford would probably take a wage cut to go to Barcelona, but he's not going to take a wage cut for probably the other suitors that will come for him. So, wages will come off the books, but how much cash they're going to have, I think let's hope that it's Anderson and Baleba, or probably Baleba plus question mark. But
reports in the papers tomorrow that City are interested in Anderson. So I suppose they'd struggle to buy him if they're in the Championship. Check out NQAT Extra for our conversation about that one. You know, we've gone 50 minutes in this pod and barely talked about the game, but there was so little to actually talk about in terms of the actual
how it speaks to the big picture. A bit of deflection, a bit of denial.
I know, it is a little bit of denial. God. Well, you've got Leeds coming up on, when is it? It's Saturday or Sunday, isn't it? Sunday, I think.
I haven't even looked ahead yet. I just know it's next year. So
yeah, it is next year.
Sure.
It's
I think it was I think it was a 3-day break. 3-day break before the trip.
All right. And it's a lunchtime kickoff because they don't trust Manchester and Leeds fans to not attack each other if they've had a good afternoon of drinking, which is fair enough, I guess. I mean, they're doing all right, actually, Leeds at the moment. They're not going to go down, are they? And Calvert-Lewin, I'm sure you've seen his shot map going around social media, the Opta map. They don't let him have the ball anywhere near the centre spot, is my advice there. We had a very good record against them when they came up last time. Stuck 5 and 6 past them.
One of the best games that we've had in the last decade, that one.
Doesn't look like we're in that kind of mode right now, though.
No, and I mean, the concern for me is that is the sort of game you need a Matthias de Ligt or Harry Maguire. One of the things that I'm sorry to go off track again, but I was wondering what you think of this. So I commented on just a tweet of United's the other day when they were talking about injury updates. And I was like, I wish that the Premier League had stricter reporting guidelines like American sports have and Australian sports have too, because I don't understand how we don't know anything about de Ligt or Maguire. They're just out. And I know that players are entitled to privacy. It's not really about that. It's just a timeline for when they are back should be like a mandatory requirement. That just seems fair so that fans understand what happens with players who are out. You shouldn't find out about – you can find out about players out an hour before the game, sure, but I just think there's a better way to go about it.
They've been super secret squirrel under Amorim on injuries all throughout. They're just no clarity whatsoever. Yeah. We don't know whether Maguire's out for another week or months. Bruno Fernandes, according to Amorim, was asking him to come back to training. Yes, for the love of God, don't get injured too early. Kobbie Mainoo will be on the grass this week. That's good. How close he is to playing is unclear. No idea about Maguire and de Ligt. I mean, they've been out for a...
Mount,
maybe not.
He's training. He trained the other day, so yesterday.
Yeah, so that would help. Although, you want to be careful with him, with his injury record. The amazing thing with all these injuries is Luke Shaw's played through all of it.
Well, and the thing about Bruno, like you're saying as well, he's never had a soft tissue injury, so he might not know that probably a hamstring is not something you can just return early from. Yeah. You actually have to do the full rehab program. So I don't know. I don't know, but Leeds have been good at home. I do know that. And that is going to be a really tough trip. It was the game I was most concerned about in the 3. Turf Moor's never a fun trip, but Burnley also aren't the side that they were in previous trips under Sean Dyche. That was always why it was so difficult, because he'd just grind you down and try and squeeze a goal out. But Leeds will be really tricky. Anton Stash is probably going to have his way with United's midfield. They're going to have to find probably the most important counter. And without the 2 big central centre-backs, we're going to struggle against a player like Calvert-Lewin, because the weakness of our central defenders who are still available is they all struggle aerially somewhat. So probably a lot is going to rest on Aiden Heaven to do that job, I would say. Because, it's I don't know. So if no one's coming back, is he
depends
going
if they
to
line up in the
change?
same way. Yeah, if they line up with 3 at the back, Lissandro Martinez is the player that's supposed to be attacking the ball. Yeah,
might cause a meltdown if they line up with 3 at the back to start the game again.
Farke's done an interesting job, really, because I wondered whether his time in English football was done, really. But he's kind of reinvented himself at Leeds. It's a big job. I mean, obviously, they're owned by the 49ers. There's potential investment there if they can solidify their place in the Premier League. Ellen Road hasn't been developed for years, 20 years, basically. All throughout their wilderness years in the championships, they didn't do that. So there's money to do that. So they're a one-club city.
Yeah, they're a growth club, yeah.
I mean, it's a if you've got money and you're prepared to put it in, it's a great purchase because they have a big fan base, historically big fan base. They were a big team in the 70s. They chased the dream in the 90s, and it caused them 20 years of hurt, basically, as a result. More, in fact, but they could become a big club again, in theory, but they've got to stay in the division, which I think, I was just looking, 20 points, 6 ahead of West Ham. And I mean, of course they could go down, but they seem to have enough about them. They're not They haven't lost in the last 5 games. They're picking up enough points. It's going to be tough. And Ellen Road, even if Leeds fans haven't had 6 hours to do some drinking, will be fierce.
Yeah, it's going to be a really tough game. They're just one of those games, like whether it's Everton or Newcastle, those northern away trips are just never fun. And I just have a bad feeling about it. That said, I didn't have a great feeling about today, but I didn't think it was going to be a draw. I thought they were just going to perform poorly and get it done again. But I don't know. I don't know anymore. But if they don't have many options to change, so it's going to be a really interesting test just for Amorim, whether he's proactive in making changes or reactive, whether he put it as responding to pressure and changing the formation and lining up the players differently to try and produce a different outcome, or whether he's going to trust someone else to step in.
Well, you might want to respond to performances. I think that's fair. Like, you don't have to say it's the press that making you do it. It just wasn't
the feedback you're getting. You're getting on the pitch.
Well, enjoy it. United fans going to Ellen Road. I've been there many times. I've probably told this story on the pod. I was there for the first game. Eric Cantona was back after his transfer, which was a lot of fun, let me tell you. I think it finished 0-0, but mocking the Leeds fans was good stuff. They countered with bottles. So thanks, Leeds fans. Anyway, enjoy it. I can't say I'm super confident, because why can we be after we saw what we saw today, right? And it's, obviously Burnley having a tough time. That's the one after that. You'd hope that's a gimme, but Wolves were supposed to be a gimme. Leeds near the bottom of the table, but they've got enough about them, especially at home. And then we're into the cup game, and that's if we lose to Brighton, who are not having a good season, by the way, neither is Carlos Baleba. Maybe that's knocked 20 or 30 million off his price. But if we lose to Brighton in the cup, it's going to be a long old second half of the season, isn't it? At least the cup run would give us a bit of hope, like the Europa League did last season. Just a little bit of something.
He needs a cup run, and frankly,
really
so
does.
do we.
He really does.
And Brighton aren't the Brighton that we know. Like, they just lost a lot of quality, and maybe Hertzler isn't the coach that we thought he was going to be either, or he's just not ready for a job like that. They just tried to be a little bit too hipster with the hire, to use a probably cliche term. But yeah, the problem, like with what you're saying there, is that we don't have anything we can count on, and that is probably the most frustrating thing, is that this team is unreliable. And to me, that is pretty questionable when you have this much player quality, because I'm high on the squad. I think this is a top 6 squad at minimum, probably between 4th and 6th, depending on, because of the lack of Europe. Obviously, the teams above them have better depth, but when this team is at its strongest, it is much better than it is performing. So when people point out to me after the result today, because my mentions were full of it, we're still 6th. It's like, well, that's where we're supposed to be. So last season was a vast underperformance. They'd obviously dropped off a lot and overperformed the season before under Ten Hag. And then, it's not good enough. So they've really got to turn it around. And it's frustrating to be living this game by game cycle again.
It is, yeah. All right, well, Leeds go to Anfield on New Year's Day. Let's hope for a 22-man brawl and a fuckload of red cards just to counter
a really shitty, controversial goal would be great.
Yeah. It's, I don't know who I want to win that. Unfortunately, they can't both lose. We'll be back after the Leeds game. You can check out mine and Adam's conversation about Manchester City and the 115 charges. Patreon.com/NQAT pod for our backers pod. I will write something about something. Oh, God. I can't even bring myself to write a piece this week, but I will write something about United on my Substack as well if you want to catch that. Otherwise, you can catch Adam abusing Leeds, Liverpool, City, Newcastle, Arsenal, Chelsea fans. Who else? Pretty much everyone.
Anyone who will let me rage bait them. Yeah, I've just accepted I rage bait people now, so that's very fine. Good. That's fine. Maybe write about the 13 wins we've had in 2025, the 13 Premier League wins.
13, bloody hell.
Yeah, 13 and 38.
Catch you next time, Adam. Thanks a lot. Bye now.
Bye-bye.